Okay, let's learn in a little bit more logical format now. All right, we talked about resizing, we talked about straightening. Something that we didn't mention that I think is important, go back into Bridge and go into the Downloads folder where you have the folder of pictures from today. Photoshop Week 2 pictures. And click on the image that says Grand Tetons.jpg and open that in Photoshop so you can double click on it. Okay, who can tell me how physically big this photo is? 10 by 4.5. Yep. At what resolution? And that's high resolution, right? That's print quality. Okay. So we have a 10-inch print, 4.5 inches tall. That's our image size. We've been looking at that before. Go ahead and say okay or cancel, doesn't matter. The image itself is the photograph. So let's say it's an 8 by 10. This is your photo. That's image size. It's also sitting on a canvas, and at this time the canvas, the piece behind it, is the exact same size. We can, however, make the canvas size bigger to, in essence, like matte the photo. Okay? So instead of adding a whole other layer that's bigger and stacking it underneath here, we can just change the canvas size and stretch it out and have our photo float on this canvas. Okay? So that's under image also. But instead of image size, it's canvas size. And right now the canvas is exactly the same size as the image, 10 by 4.5. We have two ways of changing that. If we knew exactly what we wanted to do, like I want to put, or let's just say we have a frame that's 15 by 10, or 15 by 8. We could say, make the width 15, make the height 8, and then this box down here shows you the anchor point, which is dead center. So right now it's going to stay dead center, and any extra size is going to be equally pushed top, bottom, left, and right. That's fine. There's also a color swatch. How do you want your canvas to look? So right now the background color for me is set at white. My foreground is set at like a yellow. So I could pick either one of those, or, whoops, didn't mean to do that. From the drop down, I could choose white, black, gray, or other. I could go into the swatch, the color picker. I want to put a black canvas. So I'm going to choose it from this drop down and say okay. And then I'm going to zoom out so that you can see that on my desktop it did put a 15 by 8 inch canvas behind it. Notice it's still one layer. It didn't add another layer underneath it. So the canvas is bigger than the print itself. That's fine. Do an undo, Command Z. Go back into that image canvas size. The other thing you could do is say, okay, I want to add a 1 inch all around. So the width now, instead of being 10, actually has to be 12, an inch on each side. So I could say 12 by, and then an inch on the top, an inch on the bottom is 6.5. And I could say, okay, that put a 1 inch border all around it for me. Undo that, Command Z, go back into image size. The other thing you can do if you don't like math is click on this relative box. Now instead of seeing what the measurements are, you can just say on the width, I want to add 2 inches, and on the height, I want to add 2 inches, and say okay. That puts 1 on each side. Making sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's do image canvas size one more time. And let's say that this is how we like it, but we actually want to add more down here alone. You know how a lot of pictures are framed that way, or they write text down there? So what we would do is we change our anchor point to be the top center. So click on the top center box in this anchor area. The width is fine, but the height we want to add, I don't know, 2 inches. But We're locking it down as it is and adding all of it to the bottom. And say, okay, and it did. Now we could add type down there or whatever. Okay, so that's the canvas. It's different than the image size. Typically, we don't deal with this. The canvas is the same size as our lowest layer, and that's that. But if you ever wanted to do this matting, this is how you can do it. It's really simple. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. Let's close the Tetons. Go back into Bridge. And I want you to open keystoning.jpg. Let's see. Zoom in a little bit so it kind of fills your screen a little bit more. Okay, this is what happens with certain lenses and when you're taking pictures of things that are really tall. You stand underneath them and you shoot up and it ends up looking like they go inward, right? So this building really isn't collapsing into itself. It's straight when you're in real life. So to fix this picture, this is an issue with keystoning, is what it's called. So we want to change the way it's stretched, basically. We want to stretch it out, but only on the top to match the bottom. All right. First thing we need to do to make this work is we all have a background layer over here, and it's locked. And by default, background layers are always locked. To turn this into a regular layer that we can do things to, all we have to do is double click on it. And it says it's going to call it layer 0. If you wanted to name it, there's your chance. Say OK. Now it's a regular layer that we can do things to. And what we want to do is a free transform on this. The keyboard shortcut to do transforming, and you're going to use this one plenty, is Command T. So do a Command T, and notice that you have all of the boxes around it. Also make sure that you're not zoomed in so much that you can't see around in the work area, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to take this one point and drag it out here into the work area. So if you're too zoomed in, it's not going to work. All right. Holding the command button, we are going to grab and keep it down this top right corner, and we're going to start pulling out to the right to try to get it to straighten up on that side a little bit. Don't go down or up. If you want to hold it perfectly straight while you're dragging to the right, you hold the Shift key also. That'll keep you straight. So straighten up that side, let go of your mouse and then your keyboard. Now we want to go over and do the other side. Hold the command button, grab that top corner, and start straightening that out a little bit. Now, we can get too carried away here real quickly, but straighten it out the best you can, and then sometimes it's necessary to come down to the bottom points and push them in. So if you need to do that, come down to the bottom, hold command, and push in these left and right points to kind of straighten them up a little bit. And you can see I probably went too far here. So by going into free transform on a regular layer, you're able to grab these individual anchor points and command drag them out to fix the keystoning. When you're happy with it, you have to hit enter, okay, yes, that check mark up at the top. You have to do something to say, yes, do this. Now, if I were done the way I did it by pushing in the bottoms a smidge too, I'm going to have to crop this to clean it up, right? Because I have to fill that dead space. We'll actually learn a really cool way of filling this and letting Photoshop's brain do the work. But for now, let's just crop it to get rid of that. So we're going to want to go into our crop tool, but this time we don't want anything necessarily preset. So clear it all out, and just holding on to these side bars, we're going to move it in a little to get rid of any dead spot at the bottom of your image, if you have that like I do. So I'm just pushing it in a little bit. You can see because I'm in that non-destructive crop, I'm seeing what used to be there. I'm seeing what I pulled out, stretched out. And then you say yes. Okay, that's called fixing keystoning. You don't have this a lot, but if you ever see a building that looks wonky and you need to fix it, it's that easy. All right, let's do go back to Bridge and double click on Pina Palace and practice keystoning on that yourself right now. So the first thing you have to do is what to get this to work?
Or no, you have to unlock that.
Yeah, you can't Command T right away because it's a locked, well actually this one isn't, mine says layer 0. If it says locked background layer, you can't do anything. If you're to layer 0 already, which apparently we are, you can Command T to get into free transform. And then by holding Command, you can go to those corners and start straightening out your building. Right side doesn't look too bad on this one. Kind of an issue with this left side. So like I said, sometimes it's more than just dragging one point. Sometimes you have to go down to the bottom and fix that as well. And then you would ultimately crop it also. Doing okay with that? All right. You can close both of those files and we don't need to save them. Go back to Bridge. And in the same folder of practice files, I want you to click on Girl JPEG. And since chapter 2 in our new book jumped us right into correcting photos, I'm going to show you all the tools and a little bit better example, I think, of how we can fix this photo of this girl. So if you were looking at this photo, what is one of the first things that you see that needs to be fixed? Yeah, I was going to say, what catches your eye? Red eye, right? So that happens on digital cameras when the flash goes off, and especially when the flash is really close to the aperture in the lens. So on smaller point-and-shoot cameras, your flash is really close to where it goes in. So that light goes in, goes to the back of their pupil, hits all the blood, and lights it up red. This is exactly what happened. Whatever. That's what happens. You get that reflection back. On SLR cameras, your pop-up flash tends to be up higher or externally. It doesn't tend to do that as badly. You really get this with small cameras where the flash is close by. So there's a feature on your cameras called red eye. Anybody ever use it? Good. Anybody ever use it and want to tell us what it does? Anybody know?
Flash first.
Yeah. So if you turn on red eye, it flashes like flash, 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 flash. And your people are going, what's going on, what's going on? And what's really happening is that their pupil is getting as small as possible because it's getting flashed, so that in theory it's not going to be filled with red. But usually what happens is it goes flash, 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 takes the real picture, and by then they're like walking away because they're done, right? Stupid. So red eye is stupid. Don't use it on your camera. We can fix it super fast in here. So nested in your tools of the healing brush that we already used, spot healing brush, all of these, at the very bottom is the red eye tool. I'm going to zoom in to get closer to her eyes. Hold the hand down if you need to. How this tool works is it takes red pixels and desaturates the red out of them. So instead of making it look flat black and stupid and fake, it's just going to desaturate it. So there's still going to be some tints of gray. So you can do two things. You can either click on the red in her eyeball, or you can click and drag a marquee over it. Sometimes one works better than the other. Right now I'm only getting half of her eye over and over and over again. But can you see how it's not pitch black? It's not fake. It doesn't look stupid. It looks, there's still dimension in the eye. So this pulled out the red, but here's how it works. I want you to go down to her lip and draw a marquee around her lip. Anything that is a red pixel, it's desaturating. It's pulling the red out of it. If you were to do this under her eyes, any red or pink is desaturated, and you basically give the poor girl black eyes.
Oh my god.
So that's what it's doing. It's pulling out the red pixels. So you have to be careful with this. You're only going to want to do this on the pupils, not everywhere else. So if you want to undo several times, or in Photoshop we have the history panel, which is one of my best friends. If you go up to the window drop-down box and come down to history, and then you can drag this history thing to make sure you can see everything. So here's all the steps I've done. I've opened it and I've done red eye removal like 13 times. You can step back in time and undo what you did. So I can go all the way back to the point where I just fixed her eyes and I didn't give her black eyes and everything else. Okay, so the history panel can be really helpful. Just going to collapse that now. So we fixed her red eyes. All right. The next tool that we're going to look at is the clone stamp tool. So it's a whole different tool family. It's 2 down from where we were, and it looks like a rubber stamp. And again, if you hold it, you see that it flies out to be a clone stamp or a pattern stamp. Clone is the default and the one that we're going to be using, so make sure you're on that version. All right. This one works like that second healing brush where we have to alt-click to set a point, and it's going to pick up pixels and deposit them where we tell it to. What makes it different is it's not going to do any edge blending, it's not going to blend the lighting, it's not going to do all that cool stuff. It's literally going to pick them up and plop them down. So, once we've clicked on the clone stamp, let's look at our option bar. We have the size of the brush and the hardness, just like before. We have modes that we haven't really talked about, but if ever something is acting funky in Photoshop, I want you to look for a mode drop-down box and make sure it's on normal. It could have gotten bumped to one of these accidentally or not reset, and it's going to misbehave completely. So just make sure your mode is on normal. Opacity and flow, that's how much you can see through it and how fast this adjustment flows out in the case of an airbrush. Anybody ever worked with an airbrush? Maybe you've seen it at the fair though when they're brushing like those caricatures. It blows out the color, and the more you go over it, the more it stacks up, right? You can get your cursor to behave the same way as an airbrush, to keep stacking color on top. And then under the sample, we have options. Sample only the current layer, current and below, or all layers. Right now we only have one layer, so it's fine. But typically, when you work non-destructively, let's say that we used a different tool and we fixed all of her blemishes. Actually, let's do that. Let's do it in a different order. Let's go back to the spot healing brush, the one we used before. So now it's going to be nested under the red eye. So it's that top one that looks like a Band-Aid with a circle. And remember I told you that that one is smart. You click once over the blemish, make sure that your cursor is as big and slightly bigger than the blemish, and it's going to sample the good skin around it and fix it. So
Oh my god, it does.
if I wanted to fix this blemish up here on her forehead, which is a freckle, I would just make sure my brush is slightly bigger, my cursor, and I click once and it fixes it. Hold down your space bar to get the hand to move this around, and you can sample. So any blemish that has good skin around it, this tool is going to work great. You also, just so you know, don't have to just click once. So if you watch on my screen for just a second, if I wanted to fix these 2 blemishes, I could paint around like we did with that crease. You just got to be careful that it doesn't make some weird pattern. So any blemish, you can go ahead and do this. Now I want you to stop and look at your layers panel. Where have you been making all these corrections?
On the original.
On the original layer, meaning it's, if I hit save, it's done, right? What if I took off all of her freckles and she came back and said, "What? Why did you do that? I have freckles. Why are they gone?" If I hit save, it's done. It's destructive editing. So go to your history panel if you don't have that open. So under Window, History,
And all the spot healing that you just did, back it up. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to work non-destructively. So what we want to do is create a brand new layer. So in our layers panel, at the very bottom, far right, the icon that's lit up is create new layer. I want you to click on that, and it says layer 1, and if you want to double click on the name of layer 1, we can give it a logical name. So let's just call this blemish fix. This is where we want to work, and we want to deposit all of our fixes of her blemishes. However, if we're on the, go back to your healing brush. Up at the top in our option bar here, we have an option at the far right that says sample all layers. We need to turn that on because if we don't and we're sampling in this layer, there's nothing there. We can't fix anything. So click on the sample all layers, and then all of these corrections that you make are now going to be applied to this new floating layer called the blemish fix. So now we can go around with this tool and we can simply click on any blemishes we think we see. And all of those fixes are going to be applied. If I turn off the eyeball to my background layer, this is what I see. That's the blobs I use to fix. Okay. So that's how you can work non-destructively. Again, like I said, if these were all, freckles and she was offended that you took them out, not everybody likes your version of retouching. So this is a way of working non-destructively to make sure it works well. Okay, let's go down further on her neck, and let's say that we hate this necklace. Using the tool that we have right now, I want to show you how this is going to work. I'm going to make my cursor a little bit bigger, and as long as there's good stuff around it, it's going to fix it fairly well. But when I get up by her hair, it's not really going to know how to fix it the best way. Do you see how it keeps making blurry hair out here, and it's getting uglier and uglier?
Ew, ew.
Right, that's the good reaction. This is not the proper tool for this. So undo a few times or use your history panel to back up until, whoa, too far, to where you can see the necklace again. So the healing brush, or even the one where you option click and select, always at the end does the blending. So when you get over to the point where she has hair on one side and skin on the other, it's going to grab that hair and like suck it in and blend it in. And that's not what you wanted. You wanted a clean edge to fix it. Yep.
I was actually even with like how it doesn't work well with like the necklace as well.
Yeah, it doesn't always work there because the necklace isn't one single blob that has perfect skin all around it, so it can work. The necklace still has necklace coming out on two sides, so it's always going to try to keep blurring that part, the weird necklace part. So you have to use the right tool for the job. So that's where this clone stamp comes into play. So let's switch back to that tool that's 2 down, the clone stamp tool. Let's go up and just look at our brush drop down and see if we have a hard or a soft brush. A soft brush is going to blur the edges a little bit. A hard brush is going to make them exactly as they are. So what that means is that if I sample the spot on her chest with a circle that's fairly big, and at the bottom of my circle she has a freckle, when I paste it up here with that hard edge, it's going to exactly paste those pixels as they were. So you probably want a little bit of a softer brush when you're working with this tool. So I'm just going to pull down the hardness somewhere down. I'm at 19%. We'll see how that works. The size of it, I have no clue until I get in my image and I can see it's way too small. So I'm going to use that right bracket and I'm going to make it bigger. Now remember, with this, you can't just click. You have to first sample skin and then basically paint it over the problem. So I'm going to go just below her, oh, here's the other thing. At the very top option bar, I'm still in current layer. My current layer has nothing of the necklace. So in that drop down, I need to say, hey, sample all layers, or current and below would be the same thing in this case. Now when I come down here with my cursor, even though I'm in this blank blemish fix layer, it's knowing to sample everything, which is actually the layer of her skin and her necklace. So hold down the Option key to get your bullseye. Sample clean skin below the necklace. Let go. Now move your cursor up and start painting. Notice that that plus sign is moving in tandem with me, like there's a wire connecting the two. So it's sampling where the plus sign is and depositing it as I go up. When you use this tool, you're going to do in short bursts. You're going to sample and paint a little bit, let go. Resample in a new area and paint. So your one hand is almost always on the Option key, ready to resample, because eventually you're going to run out of clean area. Like my little plus sign is going to be in her hair, and I'm going to start painting more hair again. So sample something near it. The thing that you notice though is that this is very literal. Whatever the color of skin is, it's pasting right over top of it, and it's not blending like the other one did. So you might be better to use this tool around the edges and put skin, paste skin around all the edges, and then go back with that smart healing brush and use it to do all the blending for you. So it's a combination of tools. This is not looking super great right now. Okay, but this is how you use the clone stamp. You have to Option click to pick up some pixels. Sometimes your cursor's too big. Other times, do you see how I'm sampling way down low on her chest and that color like does not match? Now that I'm up here in her neck, look at how different the color is. And this is literal. It's picking up those pixels and putting them down. It's not doing any blending. So you would do your best to get rid of this necklace, and then you'd say, yeah, none of this is looking great. So let's just turn off the eye next to the blemish layer. Turn off all of those fixes that we did. And just for fun, let's try a new layer. So go to the bottom of your layers panel, click on the new layer button. It's named layer 1. Let's double click on it and call this patch. And now let's try using the patch tool that we've already used. So nested under your healing brushes is the patch tool, third down. Again, in the option bar, make sure that we're sampling all layers because we're working on a blank layer right now. That's where we're depositing all of our fixes. Take your patch tool. Let's just make a little selection around this necklace, as best like that, and then drag it down into clean skin below and let go. That at least does a little bit of blending and lighting. So maybe that's a starting point, and you go from there and you clean up. Okay? You have to use all of these different tools in combination to get the best result, but the biggest thing is you never do it on the background layer because that's destructive editing. If you hit save, it's done forever. Especially if you never saved the file under a new name and you can't go back to it, you have changed her. So this whole idea of adding adjustment, I'm not going to call it adjustment layers because that's different. You're adding a blank layer above it and putting your fixes on that is a safe way of working. Okay? Patch tool. Okay. So you can play around with that. Hopefully we're going to hit this a lot more in detail. But let's, if you have marching ants, Command D to deselect those. And you can close this file without saving it. Just click on Don't Save. And